It happened in front of everyone. My sister sobbed into Mom's arms, pointing at me. She stole Dad's money. My father's voice thundered, "Get out!" Jade loud enough for the neighbors to hear. No one looked at me, not even Mom. I was 16 barefoot on the porch, rain soaking through my shirt, my heart beating louder than his anger. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I just walked into the dark, clutching the only thing left, my truth. Weeks later, when she bragged about it, someone else heard every word. And that changed everything. Stay with me, it gets louder from here. Back then, we looked like any other family in our quiet Ohio neighborhood, neatly trimmed lawn white porch pumpkins on the steps every fall. From the outside, the Smiths were steady, polite, ordinary. Inside, though, there was always a scale I could never balance. Dad worked long hours at the auto shop and measured worth in obedience. Mom kept the house spotless and hated making a scene. Haley, my little sister, was the soft one. She knew how to cry just enough to melt everyone's heart. And me, I was the quiet achiever, the one who believed love could be earned by doing everything right. I remember Saturday mornings when I'd make pancakes for everyone while Dad read the paper. If Haley burned hers, he laughed and said she's still learning. If I missed a spot on the counter, he sighed like it ruined his day. When I brought home an art ribbon from school, Mom said, "That's nice, Jade, but you should focus on real subjects." But when Haley landed a background role in a Christmas play, she filmed it like a Hollywood premiere. Dad even printed flyers to hand out at church. I told myself that was just parenting, that every family had favorites. I smiled through it, cleaned up after Haley, and reminded myself we were sisters, not rivals. She'd borrow my sweaters, leave them stained, and I'd still fold her laundry. She'd forget her homework, and I'd help her finish it before bed. I thought kindness could fix anything. I thought being the good one mattered. That illusion cracked slowly, little things like the way Mom would hush me if I corrected Haley, or how Dad's face softened only when she spoke. One night during dinner, Haley spilled grape juice across the table. It splashed onto my sketchbook. I froze. Dad snapped at me. "Don't overreact." Then he smiled at her. "It's okay, honey. Accidents happen." My hands shook as I dabbed the pages dry, pretending it didn't sting. That's when I realized something simple but brutal. My place in that house wasn't to be loved. It was to make loving her easier for everyone else. And still, I stayed quiet. Because that's what peace looked like in our family, silence wrapped in smiles. The older we got, the clearer it became. Haley was the sun, and I was the shadow that made her shine brighter. Every compliment to her came with a quiet comparison aimed at me. When she got a C in math, Dad said she just needs time. When I brought home an A, he said, "Don't brag." At church, people would say, "Your girls are so different." Mom always laughed. "Yes, one's the angel, the other's artistic." I knew what she meant. Artistic was her polite word for difficult. I kept trying to win them over. I stayed after school to help teachers clean up the art room. I volunteered at the library. I even helped Mom decorate for Haley's birthday balloons, cupcakes, glitter all over the floor. When the guests arrived, Mom pulled me aside and whispered, "Stay out of the pictures, honey. Let her have the spotlight." I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. But when the camera flash went off and I wasn't in the frame, something inside me cracked. At dinner that night, Dad poured Haley another glass of soda, ruffled her hair, and said, "She's such a sweetheart, never gives us trouble." I laughed too quietly because the alternative was crying. Then came the whispers at school. Someone, probably Haley, told her friends I was jealous that I always needed attention. People started watching me differently, waiting for me to prove her right. I worked harder to stay invisible. It almost worked until the missing money. It was a Saturday. Dad had been saving for a new car part, cash tucked in an envelope in his desk. I saw him count it once, nearly $200. That evening, Haley came into my room, eyes red. "Dad's furious," she said, voice trembling. "He can't find the money." I stood up alarmed. Maybe he misplaced it. She hesitated, then looked at me the way a snake sizes its prey. "You should talk to him before he finds out." Minutes later, Dad burst into my room, veins visible at his temple. "Where is it?" he barked. I blinked. "What?" He yanked open drawers, threw my clothes aside until his hand reached under my pillow. The envelope. My breath froze. Haley gasped behind him, perfect timing. I told her not to. Dad, she cried. I told her it wasn't worth it. Mom covered her mouth. Dad's face turned the color of fury. After everything we've done for you, he said, voice shaking. Dad, I didn't enough. The word hit harder than any slap. I remember the silence afterward, the kind that hums inside your skull. I remember Haley's tears hitting the floor. I remember the sound of my own heartbeat, wild and helpless. That was the moment I realized there was no space left for truth in that house. Lies had taken root too deep. Later that night, I heard them whispering downstairs. Dad's voice low, full of shame. Mom's higher, frantic. Haley's sobs between them like punctuation marks. I stayed on the stairs, gripping the railing, listening to my own family plan my exile. She needs to learn a lesson, Dad said. Maybe she'll change, Mom replied. She scares me, Haley whispered. I wanted to scream that I was still their daughter, but when I looked down the dark hallway, I understood something else. Instead, no matter what I said, they had already chosen the version of me they wanted to believe. And I wasn't in it. It happened 3 nights later. The October wind howled outside, rattling the windows while I sat cross-legged on my bed, sketching under the soft desk lamp. The smell of pencil shavings, the sound of my playlist, everything felt still. Then the door slammed open. Dad stormed in, face flushed. Mom followed, clutching Haley, who looked small and trembling in her arms. She confessed, Mom said quietly, voice shaking. She saw you take it. My pencil rolled off the bed. For a second, my mind went blank. Take what I whispered. Dad shoved the crumpled envelope in my face. The money, don't play dumb. He didn't let me finish. He yanked the blanket off my bed, flipped the pillow, and there it was, an envelope filled with cash I'd never seen before. My heart dropped so hard I couldn't even breathe. Haley covered her mouth, eyes wide and wet. I'm sorry, Jade, she sobbed. I didn't want to tell them, but I couldn't hide it anymore. I turned to her, stunned. You put it there, didn't you? Dad's hand slammed down on my desk so hard the lamp flickered. Watch your tone, he barked. You should be ashamed. Mom looked at me, her lips trembling. Why would you do this to us? To your sister. The world blurred. My voice came out cracked. I didn't steal anything. You have to believe me, but they didn't. The decision was already written across their faces. Dad grabbed a black trash bag stuffed in whatever he thought were my things, socks, a sweater, a pair of jeans, and thrust it against my chest. Get out, this house doesn't harbor thieves. I just stared at him, my fingers numb around the plastic. Dad, please, go, he said. Right now. Mom didn't speak. She only held Haley closer, whispering, It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. I'll never forget the way Haley looked at me, then how her tears suddenly stopped, how the corner of her mouth twitched upward for just a second. A smile small and cruel, and in that moment, I knew. The front door opened. Cold air rushed in, cutting through my skin like glass. The porch light glowed behind them as Dad shoved me out. The trash bag hit the ground with a dull thud. My bare feet touched the icy concrete, and I bit back a gasp. The door slammed. The lock clicked. Silence. For a long time, I just stood there staring at the wood grain of the door, the light bleeding through the gap at the bottom. I thought about knocking about, screaming until someone listened, but something in me broke clean instead. I knew even if I shouted until my voice vanished, no one would open that door again. So I turned away. The night was bitter wind slicing through my thin pajamas. My breath came out in white clouds as I stepped off the porch and onto the street. The asphalt stung like fire under my feet, but I kept walking. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk, the moon hung low, and somewhere far off a dog barked once and fell silent. By the time I reached the small park near school, my legs were shaking. I sat on a cold bench, hugging the trash bag to my chest. Inside it, I could feel the corner of my sketchbook pressing against my ribs, a tiny piece of who I used to be. For hours, I watched the streetlights blink my body, shivering uncontrollably. And when dawn finally bled into the horizon, one thought circled in my head, steady and cold. If they could throw me away so easily, then I would learn how to live without them. The first few nights blurred into each other: park benches, bus stops, the empty library staircase. I learned how to stay invisible. I'd sit in the farthest corner of the library until closing, pretending to read. When the staff turned off the lights, I'd sneak back in, curl up behind the old bookshelf, and wrap my jacket around my knees. The hum of the air vent became my lullaby. Sometimes I went to the gas station down the street where the clerk had stopped asking questions. I'd rest my head on the plastic table near the window, the smell of gasoline and burnt coffee thick in the air. Every time the door chimed, I flinched, expecting my father's voice. It never came. Days passed like that quiet, hungry cold, and then one afternoon I saw her, Grandma Maggie, standing outside the library in her gray coat holding a paper bag. "You look like you haven't eaten," she said softly. I froze, terrified she'd scold me, drag me home. But she just handed me the bag, sandwiches, an apple, a folded 20. "Stay where you are, Jade. Let me handle this." I didn't understand what she meant then, but I would. 2 weeks later, I found out she'd gone to a family dinner at her house. My parents were there, proud of their good daughter. Haley was laughing, showing pictures on her phone, the star of the night. And that's when she said it. The words that changed everything. "You won't believe what I pulled," she bragged, smirking at her cousin over FaceTime. I slipped the money under her pillow and cried a little. They totally bought it. "She's gone now, problem solved." Grandma heard every word. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even blink. She quietly took her iPad, hit record, and let the truth hang itself. The next morning, she texted Mom, "Meet me at the church after service." Alone. I didn't know all of this until later. But that day, while I sat in the library sketching with numb fingers, Grandma was confronting them. She played the recording in the small prayer room behind the altar. Haley's voice echoed off the walls, every cruel word, every giggle. Mom broke down, sobbing. Dad turned white. Grandma didn't yell. She just said, "You threw away a child for a lie. Now you'll make it right." By that afternoon, they had no choice. Grandma made them post a public apology on Facebook in the church group, even emailed my school principal. My name cleared within hours. The same people who whispered behind my back now wrote comments like, "Poor Jade," and "How could they?" Dad's phone buzzed nonstop. Mom couldn't leave the house. And Haley, she stayed in her room, curtains drawn. That night, Grandma came to find me again. When I saw her standing in the library doorway, I dropped my pencil and ran. She held me tight, whispering, "You don't need to defend yourself anymore. The truth spoke for you." Later, in her warm kitchen over soup and soft lamplight, I finally let myself cry, not from pain, but from relief. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't invisible. Grandma kept me with her after that. Her red brick house smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and every morning she'd hum while frying eggs, pretending not to notice when I lingered in the doorway, just to be sure she was real. She didn't ask me to forgive anyone. She only said, "Let the truth do what it's meant to do, heal you, not chain you." At school, teachers who once avoided me now met my eyes. My English teacher slipped a note onto my desk. "I'm sorry. I should have asked, not assumed. I didn't need more than that." Haley avoided me completely, walking the opposite direction in the hall. At church, people whispered, but this time the weight wasn't on my shoulders, it was on theirs. One weekend, Grandma brought me a pair of new running shoes, navy blue with white lace. "You need to feel the ground again," she said. I started running in the mornings through quiet streets past houses still asleep. The air was sharp clean. Each step felt like reclaiming something they'd taken. A month later, Dad tried to call. I stared at his name glowing on the screen, the same name that once ordered me out into the cold. I didn't answer. Some doors once closed should stay that way. Now I sit on Grandma's porch sketchbook, open on my knees, the sun sinking over the maple trees. The same October wind blows, but it doesn't bite anymore. I draw the scene light spilling across the yard, leaves swirling like tiny sparks of gold, and I smile. They once thought throwing me out would erase me. Instead, it set me free. Have you ever had to lose everything just to find peace? If this story hit home, share your thoughts below and subscribe for more true family betrayal and quiet revenge stories. Move, Autumn! My father's voice sliced through the terminal like a blade. My sister's laughter followed high, polished, cruel. She can't even afford economy. Cameras turned, whispers spread. I didn't move. I just stared at my reflection in the glass, calm, unreadable, waiting. 2 years ago, I would have crumbled. Not today. A man in uniform stopped beside me. "Miss Monroe, your jet is ready." My father's smirk cracked. Leia's hand slipped from her designer bag. I smiled faintly. Perfect timing. They thought I'd come to watch them leave. They were right, just not in the way they think. 2 years earlier, before airports and headlines, before anyone cared who I'd become, I was just another name printed under my father's company logo. Monroe Engineering. Seattle. Family business. At least that's what I used to call it. Back then, I believed loyalty meant safety. If I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, maybe he'd see me. I was the responsible one, the daughter who handled deadlines, cleaned up after mistakes, stayed late when others left. I never asked for attention. I just wanted respect. Dad wasn't cruel then. He was just busy, a man who measured love in results. His watch never left his wrist, his tone always somewhere between pride and impatience. "You're sharp, Autumn," he used to say, "but you need to toughen up if you want to lead." I thought that was advice. I didn't realize it was a warning. The shift started small. One Sunday dinner, he brought her Clara. She was 30, stylish, the kind of woman who knew how to make a man feel young again. She laughed at his old jokes, placed her hand on his sleeve when he spoke. I smiled polite, but something inside me stiffened. By Thanksgiving, she'd moved in. By Christmas, her daughter Leia was sitting in my old chair at the table, her voice filling the space where mine used to belong. Leia was 5 years younger, perfect hair, perfect timing. She knew how to compliment without meaning it. "You're so smart, Autumn," she'd say, eyes gliding over my worn sweater. "I wish I had your discipline." It sounded like praise, but it landed like pity. Dad adored her. Everyone did. She made noise where I made order. When I finished a project, he'd nod. When she sent an email, he'd clap. "That's initiative," he'd say. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that family changes and maybe this was mine expanding. But every week the air shifted, small sharp comments slipped into conversation. Leia's more relatable dad said once, glancing at my plain suit, "Clients love personality." That night, I went home and stared at the glow of my laptop, my project file open. It was an algorithm that could cut logistics costs by 40% a system. I'd built line by line, believing it would be my legacy. I named it Monrovia. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom, ready to present. Leia was already there, sitting in my seat. Her hair curled perfectly, a folder in front of her labeled "New Proposal." My stomach sank. Dad smiled like nothing was wrong. "We're streamlining the process. Leia will take the lead on this one. You'll support from back end." The words hit harder than any insult. Support from back end. I wanted to speak, to say it was mine, that I'd spent 6 months building it. But then I looked at his face, calm, sure, proud of the choice he thought was strategic, and I knew nothing I said would change it. So I nodded. Of course. He mistook my quiet for obedience. He didn't realize silence can record everything. After the meeting, Leia leaned over my chair, perfume sweet and heavy. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "It's just business." Business. The word tasted like iron. That night, I copied my files onto a single USB drive, slipped it into my coat pocket, and walked out of Monroe Engineering for the last time. Outside, the sky was the same color as steel. Cold. Predictable. I looked back once at the glowing sign, his name still shining above the door, mine erased beneath it. He told me once I'd never make it without him. I didn't argue. I just decided to prove him wrong. It didn't happen all at once. Favoritism never does. It creeps in quietly like fog, soft, polite, impossible to name until you can't see the road ahead anymore. A month after I left, Dad called. Not to ask how I was, but to say he hoped there were no hard feelings. Leia had just been featured in a business magazine for revolutionizing Monroe Engineering's new logistics division. My division, my algorithm. The article quoted him, "She's a natural leader, charismatic, forward-thinking. Reminds me of myself." I read it twice. He'd never said that about me. Not once. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The silence between us was its own obituary. Still, I checked their updates, sometimes habit, maybe punishment. Leia on red carpets at charity dinners, shaking hands with investors who once called me kiddo. She smiled for every camera like she'd earned the flash. and Dad stood beside her proud like nothing about that picture was stolen. When my mother died years ago, I promised myself I'd keep the family together, that I'd be the bridge. But some bridges shouldn't be crossed twice. By the end of that year, I'd poured everything into Monrovia Systems, the name no one at Monroe Engineering even remembered. I rented a small workspace above a coffee shop, worked nights after my day job, living off vending machine, coffee, and hope. Meanwhile, Dad sent Christmas photos matching pajamas, champagne glasses, Monroe family holiday. Leia wore a diamond bracelet. I recognized it immediately. It was Mom's. That picture did something to me. Not rage exactly, something colder, quieter. The kind of anger that doesn't burn, it freezes. I didn't reply to his email that year either. Weeks turned into months. Investors said no. Banks said no. One night after another rejection, I sat in the dark office and whispered, maybe he's right. Maybe I can't make it without him. And then my phone lit up an auto notification. Someone at Monroe Engineering had logged into my old account. The file name flashed on my screen, Monrovia Prototype V2.0. They were still using it. My code, my work. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loud, not messy, just final. I shut the laptop, took a long breath, and said out loud for the first time, he'll see me, just not the way he expects. From that night on, everything changed. I started small, local contracts, small freight companies willing to test my software, then regional partners. Then one day, a major investor from New York called. He'd heard about an independent system outperforming Monroe Engineering by 200%. When he asked for the founder's name, I almost smiled. Autumn Monroe, I said. Yes, that Monroe. The following week, my company's first press article came out. The headline read, "The quiet innovator behind the future of AI logistics." Quiet. I like that word. Because while they laughed, while they clinked glasses and posed for cameras, I'd been building a storm. And storms don't announce themselves. They arrive. 2 years later, the phone rang on a gray Tuesday morning. It was my father. His number, after months of silence, looked foreign on my screen. Autumn, he said, clipped formal. We're expanding the company. There's a family event this weekend. You should come. A family event. Not a dinner, not a reunion, an event. I almost said no. But something in his tone made me curious. When I arrived, the lobby of the Monroe Tower was draped in banners celebrating innovation, Monroe Engineering and Partners. Photographers stood by the elevator, champagne glasses sparkled, and at the center of it all, Leia. She stood on the stage beside Dad, hair shining under the lights, voice smooth into the microphone. It's an honor to unveil our latest breakthrough, Monroe VIA Systems. The name hit me like a punch. Monroe, VIA. They hadn't even bothered to change it completely. The crowd clapped. Flashbulbs popped. Dad smiled, wide hand resting proudly on Leia's shoulder. My chest tightened. The presentation continued, slides rolling behind them. My interface, my layouts, my code, every inch of it. No credit, no trace of me. Just applause. I didn't move. I couldn't. I watched the room, every handshake, every camera flash, the way Dad's eyes gleamed when investors surrounded him. He'd taken everything. Again. When the applause faded, I turned to leave. That's when Leia saw me. She hesitated, then smiled tight, careful. Autumn. I didn't know you'd come. You didn't invite me. Dad turned surprised. You could have said hello. Don't make this awkward. I met his eyes. This, I gestured around the lights, the banners, the code I built. This is awkward. He sighed the way he always did when I didn't play along. You're being dramatic. It's just business. You should be proud. Proud of theft. Leia chimed in, syrupy sweet. Come on, Autumn. It's all in the family. Something inside me went still. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grief. It was the sound of a door closing for good. I'm not family, I said quietly. Not yours. Dad's face hardened. You watch your tone. I looked at him one last time, steady. You said I'd never make it without you. You were right about one thing. I didn't make it with you either. Then I turned and walked out. Outside, the night air bit cold against my face. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just kept walking until the tower disappeared behind me. That moment flipped a switch in me. I realized they would never see me unless I forced them to. Not with words, not with tears, only with success so undeniable it would silence them. When I got home, I sat at my desk, opened a new document, and wrote one line across the top: Monrovia Systems. Version 3.0. Founder Autumn Monroe. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was the blueprint for it. The first 6 months after that night were brutal. I worked from a second-hand desk wedged between my kitchen and the living room. The apartment was small enough that when the coffee pot hissed, I could feel the steam on my back. Most nights I'd fall asleep with my laptop still open, code glowing against my face like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I didn't have funding. I didn't have connections. What I had was an idea everyone else had dismissed: a smarter, faster logistics AI that could predict shipment delays before they happened. The same one they'd stolen and renamed. I called it Monrovia Systems again, not as a copy, but as a reclamation. People laughed when I pitched it. Investors wanted experience, not integrity. Banks wanted collateral. I had neither. So I sold my car, then my jewelry. I moved into a smaller place, just me and the hum of a machine that felt more alive than the people I'd left behind. My assistant came later, Sophie, a bright 20-something, who believed before there was any reason to. She handled calls while I coded through the night, whispering things like, "They're going to regret underestimating you." I didn't respond, but I heard her. Year 1 bled into year 2, and something shifted. A small shipping company in Portland signed with us, then another in Chicago. Then one morning, I woke to an email that made my hands shake. Subject: Partnership Inquiry, Global Tech Logistics. By the end of that month, Monrovia Systems wasn't a dream anymore. It was a corporation, my corporation. And somehow word got out. The same industry blogs that once featured Leia started running stories about the mysterious founder taking over the logistics field. A few even asked if I was related to the Monroe family. I ignored the messages. I wanted silence to do the talking. Then came the Global Tech Summit, New York City, fall, the biggest event of the year. Monrovia Systems had been chosen as the keynote sponsor. When Sophie told me, I just said, "Good. Make the arrangements." 2 weeks later, I was standing in Terminal 3, the same terminal where 2 years earlier my father and Leia had laughed as I walked away. I wore a simple navy suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry except a watch that used to belong to my mother. The flight board flickered. New York, boarding first class. That's when I heard it. Move Autumn. The same tone, same edge. Like no time had passed. Leia's heels clicked on the polished floor. "She can't even afford economy," she said, voice sweet and venomous. People looked. Phones lifted. The air shifted, heavy and electric. I didn't move. I didn't look at them. I watched my reflection in the glass, calm, unreadable, waiting. 2 years ago, I would have crumbled. Not today. Then came the sound that changed everything: boots. Polished. Firm. A man in a navy uniform stopped beside me, posture crisp. "Miss Monroe," he said, "your jet is ready." Every noise in the terminal seemed to vanish. My father froze mid-smirk. Leia's hand slipped from her designer bag. Her boarding pass fluttered to the ground. I turned slowly, offering the faintest smile. Perfect timing. Gasps rippled. The crowd parted as I followed the officer toward the private terminal. Through the glass wall, a sleek black car waited on the tarmac beside a jet bearing my company's logo, Monrovia Systems. Behind me, I could feel their eyes burning through the glass. My father once said I'd never make it without him. He was right. I made it beyond him. The officer opened the car door. "We'll begin pre-flight when you're ready, ma'am." I nodded. "Let's go." As the door shut, the sound of laughter, their laughter was replaced by the low hum of the engines warming up. For the first time in 2 years, I felt weightless. Not because of the altitude, but because I'd finally stopped carrying their approval. Success hadn't been the revenge. Peace was. And peace, I realized, looked a lot like flying alone. The moment I stepped onto the tarmac, the noise of the terminal vanished behind the glass. It was like walking out of one life and into another. The jet gleamed under the afternoon light, white and silver against a sky the color of calm. Grant, my security officer, waited beside the stairs, posture straight. Expression unreadable except for the faint trace of a smile. "Welcome back, Miss Monroe," he said. For a second, I just stood there watching the sunlight ripple across the fuselage. Inside the terminal, I could still see them, my father, my stepsister, frozen in disbelief as passengers whispered around them. The same mouths that had laughed moments ago now murmured in awe. The entire platform froze. Grant followed my gaze. "Didn't expect that, did they?" I shook my head slowly. "No one ever does when you rise quietly." We boarded. The door closed with a soft hiss, sealing out the world I used to beg to belong to. The hum of the engines built under my feet, steady, powerful, alive. I sank into the leather seat by the window. Outside, the glass of the terminal reflected my jet like a mirror. For a fleeting second, I saw both versions of myself, the woman who once stood small in that reflection, and the one sitting here now, untouchable. My phone buzzed. Dad flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mia." He started, his voice sharp, almost panicked. "It's Autumn," I said evenly. He hesitated. What are you doing?" I looked out the window where the ground crew was giving clearance for takeoff. "Exactly what you said I couldn't." He didn't reply, just breathing, heavy, slow. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "But I learned that loving you meant losing myself." So I stopped. There was a long silence. Then click. He hung up. The engines roared. The jet began to move, rolling past the window where they still stood small behind the glass. For years, they made me feel grounded, trapped, small, insignificant. Now, as the jet lifted, I realized something simple and true. Some goodbyes aren't spoken. They're written in altitude. Manhattan shimmered below like a field of light, the skyline cutting through clouds like ambition made solid. Grant brought me a glass of water, but I barely noticed. My eyes stayed on the horizon. In that glow, I thought about everything that had led here: the boardroom, the laughter, the airport. Every time they said I wasn't enough, I had believed it a little, until I learned belief doesn't have to come from them. 2 years ago, I left with nothing but a file and a name they tried to erase. Now that name was etched on a jet engine, a company, a legacy. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove I was always right to walk away. My phone buzzed again, dozens of missed calls from the same number. I turned it face down. Some echoes don't deserve answers. Through the glass, the clouds parted, soft, endless, weightless. I smiled to myself, a real one this time. They thought I came to watch them leave. Turns out I was the one taking off all along. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you've ever had to choose peace over approval, remember this. You don't owe anyone smallness just because they're comfortable with it. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away to find your peace? Leave your story in the comments, because sometimes the quietest exits make the loudest returns.